why building retrofits? So we landed on building retrofits because buildings are the source of a great deal of greenhouse gas emissions. And we had and it's widely seen, building retrofits are widely seen around the world as a really, sort of a really low-hanging fruit, a way to take quick action on dropping greenhouse gas emissions. And this is a quote from, again, the UN IPCC, largest portion of carbon savings by 2030 for buildings in retrofitting existing buildings. But here's another thought. So the cleanest energy is the energy you don't use. It's also the least expensive. So saving electricity, look at that. Saving electricity needs about 1,000 times less capital and repays about 10 times faster than supplying more electricity. So it's a really good common sense kind of approach and could have some really practical applications. Just go on here. And just to put that in your mind about what that is, it's a very kind of pedestrian list of things, really. Insulation, heating system replacements, air sealing, hot water tank replacement, digital thermostat, window and skylight replacement, solar hot water, or geo exchange. So, big issue, pretty practical suggestion here. There are actually, turns out, benefits for sort of three areas when you look at large-scale retrofits. We have the environment, which we already talked about. We have lots of benefits for the homeowner, and we have lots of benefits for the community. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. First one, and we've been alluding to that already, is cutting greenhouse gas emissions. So we've seen lots of reports that say widespread retrofits could cut emissions. Come on, you. There we are. Widespread retrofits could cut emissions in the building sector by 27%. And if you were to go on the City of Vancouver website right now to look at their retrofit program, they're talking about 55% of the greenhouse gas emissions in Vancouver coming from buildings, including homes. Pretty good number. That would mean greenhouse gas reductions in the neighborhood of 19 megatons of CO2 equivalent per year. I think I did too many kilos by saying there. And a 7,000 retrofit on a little house could reduce average home energy use by up to 26%. It's a huge possibility. So we talked about benefits for the environment and benefits for the homeowner. I want to talk a little bit about benefits for the homeowner. So your average heating bill is about $2,000 and you save $700 a year. That's a pretty good saving. If you sell your house, you're likely to recover 61% of the upgrade when it's sold. So you have all the benefit of not having spent a lot of money on electricity, but it also increases the value of your house. And then finally, there's just the creature comfort of it. It costs less and it can be more comfortable. So a pretty bottom line and creature comfort argument. But here's another really important aspect of this kind of work. So beyond environment and beyond person and individual, there's also job creation. There's a really big economic advantage around about pointing people in this direction. So, 20 jobs for every $1 million. 20 jobs in those trades that do retrofitting. So that doesn't sound too big until you realize that it takes $4 million to create one job in your house. So $4 million for one job, or $1 million job for 20. It's a pretty good comparison to see what happens around what's the best way to generate jobs. And here's a summary: 52 to 60 more jobs for the same investment. And the other advantage about these dollars is that they're local dollars. So the people who do the retrofitting work are people who live in the communities. They go out and they buy goods from their local stores. They support the local economy. Their money isn't being hived off to hide in some Swiss bank account, usually, or offshore in that way to go into a multinational company. So it's really good. And I want to credit the CCPA here. Thank you, illustrates a different question. So not only are there more jobs for this, but they're actually greener jobs. So if you flip that around a little bit and then say, okay, how many greenhouse gas emissions are produced by this kind of work? Well, as it turns out, for every worker in oil, gas, and mining, look at that, 522.6 emissions per worker in 2008 for every worker who worked in the oil patch. For every worker who worked in the construction industry, which is where those retrofit trees would be, look at that, 2.9. So all of this goes to say that public policy that supports job growth and retrofitting, as opposed to job growth in the oil patch, is going to make a big difference in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, in terms of the number of jobs. It's a good place to be considering public policy. Now, we know there's lots of entrenched issues and interests with the oil and gas industry, so it's not like it's necessarily an easy choice, but it does show you what would happen if we could redirect public focus. The other thing about retrofit programs, an additional community benefit, is that they can also bring with them some social justice goals. So there are a number of programs in Canada, actually, that are using those programs as a way to train people from underemployed groups to be able to have good paying jobs. An example of that would be Warm Up Winnipeg. There is an organization called BUILD, which was established by Aboriginal community stakeholders. And this is what they do. They do low-cost retrofits for private and public housing. And that drops energy costs for households, so it makes it more affordable for people. It provides a training program for underemployed people. They've had really big success, actually, in moving employees from welfare to work. And in addition, they are at wages that are family-supporting jobs. So they've really been able to do a sweet spot in public policy, which is warmer houses, fewer greenhouse gas emissions, better local economy, more jobs, and dealing with helping the underemployed group get more engaged. So I want to talk a little bit now about the infrastructure for retrofitting in Canada, because there's lots more that we can do, and that's really the focus of our paper, is a new kind of mechanism for helping scale up retrofits. But right now, in Canada, we have provincial grants and initiatives. So you're all probably maybe familiar with Live Smart BC. Here in British Columbia, you get various grants for retrofits that you might do. And they've done something recently called on-bill financing, which I'll talk about a little bit later here in BC. So that program is supported by the federal government, because the federal government has an equal energy program, which is really a standardized way of going into doing energy audit in houses. So that's really good infrastructure to have across the country, can deliver lots of consistency. It's clearly going to be part of the program. You have the audit, and then you do the upgrades, and then you check to see how that went according to the audit. It's a way of keeping control and making sure that what you wanted to do happened. Now the trouble with the eco energy grants is that right now they're due to expire at the end of March 2012 here. And you might recall from some of your discussions around political forces in the country that those grants were actually added back in thanks to Jeff Layton's energetic pushing during the campaign, and they were added kind of reluctantly back in because the Harper government wanted to maintain a little bit more vote in that area. There's certainly no guarantee that it's going to be continuing past the end of March. We haven't heard anything yet that would indicate that it would. Hopefully they'll be keeping the infrastructure in place. And finally, I was talking about this point earlier. This is the standards and the energy auditors. That's the part that we hope will stay in place, even if the grants don't, because that's very important infrastructure for the provincial programs that are going on. But there's a question here. So, if it makes so much sense for a homeowner to do the retrofits, why aren't many more people doing it? What could the barriers be? Well, one of them is the amount of grant funding available. So I don't know if you know this story about Live Smart BC, but they put the grant up, and so many people signed up for it that they had to pause it for a while before they renewed it. So there's some limits to the grant funding. It's not available for everybody who wants to do it. This is a big one. It's hard to find $7,000 or $10,000 sometimes to be able to pay out to do the retrofits. And sometimes you think if you're only owning your home for 3 or 4 years, you might decide that it's not really worth the effort. And then finally, that financing, if you have to go and buy it, make arrangements for it, can be expensive. So, what the core of the paper here is something I want to talk around some of those barriers. It's a new idea. And the new idea is about municipal leadership. So we've talked about federal government and provincial government. So what are the avenues here for municipalities to take the lead? And we were fortunate enough to hear a story from the mayor of this little town, Babylon, New York. And this was at a Green Jobs conference, and they had a really interesting story to tell for Babylon, New York. And you could tell it was his kind of project, and he brought it along. They established something called Long Island Green Homes. And the basic idea was that Babylon would lend money to homeowners for retrofits. The homeowners would save a little over $1,000 a year, and they would use those savings to pay back the loan on their services bill. So it would be tied up, and it would be tied up. So the town lends the money, people get the fix done, and they pay back on their property tax bills. The average payback is almost 9 years there. And I said that already. How does it work? Another part that was really important about this was that they based the repayment on projected savings. So they adjusted the payment so that the homeowner would never be paying more than they would have been paying for their energy. And they tried to make the payment so that people would be paying a little bit less, so that it seemed like a financial advantage to do the work. Very safe for Babylon because it's coming through on their services bill, and they have the property really to hold on to. So it's a very kind of safe for the town financially. Then they were very creative in the way that they needed to find the loan money. Oh, and also they charged an administration fee of 3%. If you're running something, you have to recover the cost, so that was very smart of them to do. And the energy auditor is licensed by the town. They have control over that. Here in Canada, we have an advantage because we have the eco-energy infrastructure. There, they had to do their own. So essentially applies as an energy audit, approved when the savings are equal to or greater than the current energy bill. Payments are added to the municipal services bill. And this is what's happened. Since 2008, they've done 638 retrofits for a population of over 200,000. Huge number. And I don't even see it. And that's a huge outcome. It's really worked very, very well. And they had to have a person of vision who was the mayor. They had to have some creativity. They had a fund that they needed to hold to cap the ash from their waste facility. And so they were able to make a case that CO2 was really a solid waste, and therefore they could use some funds from that fund in order to lend out to homeowners. So they got a $2 million revolving loan fund from their creativity. So Babylon is the story that everybody talks about because it's so great. But there are other cities in the States as well who are doing that same kind of mechanism called PACE funding, where able to lend out money and get the retrofits happening and get it paid back on property tax and utility bills. We don't have that yet in Canada, although we have 1 or 2 starts. And it could work in Canada. There's basically 2 ways to do it. Something boring called local improvement charges, or else something called on-bill financing through utilities. And we think this is worth some work, because imagine how you could scale up action if you could free municipalities to take leadership on this file. So the local improvement charges, that's what happens. That's if you get a sidewalk in front of your house, a local improvement charge applies. So you're charged on your tax bill for your portion of the sidewalk improvement. That's basically a local improvement charge. The challenge in Canada is to widen that definition so that retrofits could also be included in it. But it would work much like Babylon. So So the municipalities would provide low-cost funds for the upfront costs. The owners would repay over time as a special assessment on their property taxes. The property would, the assessment would be attached to the property rather than the owner. So if it were sold up in between, and it would just transfer over, and the new owner would pay the 3 or 4 years that might be remaining and reap all the benefits if they stayed longer. Secured with a lien, so that means that the city is the first person paid, so to make sure that they get their money back for their loan. And the really key thing about this is that it doesn't affect the property taxes of non-participants. So this isn't going to hit any other taxpayers in the pocket, and they often are a little bit sensitive about that. So that's one model, local improvement charges. And the other model is called on-bill utility financing. And that actually is now set up to be done in British Columbia. The province has done on-bill legislation, financing legislation. And that would allow the utilities to lend money to homeowners to do the retrofits and to pay back on their bills. It's just getting started. There are a couple of pilot communities who are starting to work on it. And in fact, the province is going to be doing an RFP in the next few months asking for input about the regulations. So they've got the legislation, and now they want the regulations, which is how they'll actually implement it. So it's a good thing to keep on in mind, because it's got potential for us to be really a public policy tool. So, what do Canadian municipalities need to move forward? All the regulatory changes I was talking about. So it's slightly different in each province, but essentially in each province, the province needs to say, okay, municipalities, we think this is a good idea, and yes, we'll expand that definition of local improvement charges so that you can go ahead and do this initiative. There are some hesitations. People are worried that municipalities might take on too much debt, or they're worried that there might be some default. But mostly I think it's about change. I think it's mostly about this being a new idea and hard to move forward. Explicit approval, we just talked about it for a minute. All right, but before I move any further, I just want to show you a bar graph of how this might work. So here's how much you might spend on your per year on your heating, $2,800. So let's say you enter the program, and immediately you're only paying just over $2,000 for your energy, and you're saving this amount, and that's going down to pay the debt, to pay the loan down, to even save $10 a month. And then after it's all paid off, after your 7 or 10 years, then you're still only paying $2,000, and you're saving $771 for the rest of the time. So it's a pretty attractive sell, actually. All right. So in BC, like every other province, it needs clarity from the province to use this mechanism for improvements. Dawson Creek was working very diligently trying to get this happen for a while, and it fell apart. Vancouver's got an interesting pilot, which is very similar, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. But in addition, there need to be some legislative amendments. So one is to allow municipalities to record the money that they borrowed to allow for full cost recovery projects separate from the debt. So if it can be recorded separately, which is quite possible Ontario does, then it means that the municipality's credit rating isn't impacted. So that's one of the arguments that they've been using to stop it. And the other one is to allow the retrofits to stay attached to the property and not the owner, because then it becomes treated like any other local improvement and doesn't become part of the owner's personal debt. So Vancouver launched the first pilot project in Canada in the spring. It was launched in May 2011, and they have a goal to retrofit 500 homes. They had to do something a little bit creative about the funding, so they had to sort of basically put up some collateral just in case somebody defaulted on the loans, and because it's a pilot and it's a new thing. And Van Cities put some money in, and then a private donor put some money in, and this is the loan cost that people are going to be able to pay on. It's self-financing, so all the costs of administering it are included in the recovery. And we've talked about where the funding is coming from. And it's going to be recoverable. There's going to be a quarterly charge on the sent from the city to the homeowner. The city will then send it on to onto the Van City. They are actually doing some lobbying to try and get that changed. If they can get the definition changed and attached to the property owner, then they don't have to use any steps behind it, and there probably doesn't have to be the backing, financial backing from the municipality. Halifax is also doing something similar, and Halifax wants to do a similar kind of mechanism to install solar. And they did get some changes to their charter from their provincial government that will allow them to lend money to retrofit and to pull it back on the tax bill. It hasn't started yet. They're just issued an RFP. They're hoping to get going in a few months' time. So Vancouver is a beacon of light. Halifax is a beacon of light. A couple of other smaller communities in British Columbia. And we're hopeful that this will be something that will spread across the country. Just again, a few details about Halifax. They're looking at 500 to 700 homeowners. They will create 300 jobs, 2 million energy savings, will cost less than the annual energy savings. The payback is expected in 5 to 10 years. Ottawa is also exploring how to use this model. They haven't got it going yet because they do need to get some permission to move things forward. So I do have a summary sheet here for you. And the summary is that municipalities are well positioned. They could quickly take action to these mechanisms, scale up climate action quickly, stimulate the local economy, grow jobs, help residents pay less, live more comfortably, drop greenhouse gas emissions, and finally address federal and provincial gaps in retrofit programs and emission target goals. And the good thing about all of that is they could do that with no new taxes. So, a proven model, we just need a few little changes in regulations to be able to impact the change. We need these people who are doing the pilots to go forward and show Canadian communities that it can be done. And we need senior levels of government that will support the initiative. I would say that we need senior levels of government to do way more on supporting action on climate change in general. But this is a really good place to start. Okay. So, does anybody have any questions about? I'm sorry if I bored you. Yeah.
I was just curious, not in terms of the financial standpoint, but in terms of saving energy. I don't really know much about.
Really better if we avoid the whole thing. So why building retrofits? So we landed on building retrofits because buildings are the source of a great deal of greenhouse gas emissions. And we had and it's widely seen, building retrofits are widely seen around the world as a really low-hanging fruit, a way to take quick action on dropping greenhouse gas emissions. And this is a quote from, again, the UN IPCC, largest portion of carbon savings by 2030 for buildings in retrofitting existing buildings. But here's another thought. So the cleanest energy is the energy you don't use. It's also the least expensive. So saving electricity, look at that. Saving electricity needs about 1,000 times less capital and repays about 10 times faster than supplying more electricity. So it's a really good common sense kind of approach and could have some really practical applications. Just go on here. And just to put that in your mind about what that is, it's a very kind of pedestrian list of things, really. Insulation, heating system replacements, air sealing, hot water tank replacement, digital thermostat, window and skylight replacement, solar hot water, or geo exchange. So, big issue, pretty practical suggestion here. There are actually, turns out, benefits for sort of 3 areas when you look at large-scale retrofits. We have the environment, which we've already talked about. We have lots of benefits for the homeowner, and we have lots of benefits for the community, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. First one, and we've been alluding to that already, is cutting greenhouse gas emissions. So we've seen lots of reports that say widespread retrofits could cut emissions. Come on, Lou. There we are. Widespread retrofits could cut emissions in the building sector by 27%. And if you were to go on the City of Vancouver website right now to look at their retrofit program, they're talking about 55% of the greenhouse gas emissions in Vancouver coming from buildings, including homes. Pretty good number. That would mean greenhouse gas reductions in the neighborhood of 19 megatons of CO2 equivalent per year. I think I did too many kilograms there. And a 7,000 retrofit on a little house could reduce average home energy use by up to 26%. It's a huge possibility. So we talked about benefits for the environment and benefits for the homeowner. I want to talk a little bit about benefits for the homeowner. So the average heating bill is about $2,000 and you save $700 a year. That's a pretty good savings. If you sell your house, you're likely to recover 61% of the upgrades when it's sold. So you have all the benefit of not having spent a lot of money on electricity, but it also increases the value of your house. And then finally, there's just the creature comfort of it. It costs less and it can be more comfortable. So a pretty bottom line in creature comfort argument. But here's another really important aspect of this kind of work. So beyond environment and beyond person and individual, there's also job creation. There's a really big economic advantage around about pointing people in this direction. So, 20 jobs for every $1 million, 20 jobs in those trades that do retrofitting. So that doesn't sound too big until you realize that it takes $4 million to create one job in the oil patch. So $4 million for one job, or $1 million job for 20. It's a pretty good comparison to see what happens around what's the best way to generate jobs. And here's a summary: 52 to 60 more jobs for the same investment. And the other advantage about these dollars is that they're local dollars. So the people who do the retrofitting work are people who live in the communities. They go out and they buy goods from their local stores. They support the local economy. Their money isn't being hived off to hide in some Swiss bank account usually, or offshore in that way to go into a multinational company. So it's really good. And I want to credit the CCPA here. Thank you, CCPA, for doing that work. And here's just a little graph that illustrates it. So, actually it illustrates a different question. So not only are there more jobs for this, but they're actually paying jobs. So if you flip that around a little bit and then say, okay, how many greenhouse gas emissions are produced by this kind of work? Well, as it turns out, for every worker in oil, gas, and mining, look at that, 522.6 emissions per worker in 2008 for every worker who worked in the oil patch. For every worker who worked in the construction industry, which is where those retrofit trades would be, look at that, 2.9. So all of this goes to say that public policy that supports job growth and retrofitting, as opposed to job growth in the oil patch, is going to make a big difference in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, in terms of the number of jobs. It's a good place to be considering public policy. Now, we know there's lots of entrenched interests with the oil and gas industry, so it's not like it's necessarily an easy choice, but it does show you what would happen if we could redirect public focus. The other thing about retrofit programs, an additional community benefit, is that they can also bring with them some social justice goals. So there are a number of programs in Canada, actually, that are using those programs as a way to train people from underemployed groups to be able to have good paying jobs. An example of that would be Warm Up Winnipeg. There is an organization called BUILD, which was established by Aboriginal community stakeholders. And this is what they do. They do low-cost retrofits for private and public housing. And that drops energy costs for households, so it makes it more affordable for people. It provides a training program for underemployed people. They've had really big success actually in moving employees from welfare to work. And in addition, they are at wages that are family supporting jobs. So they've really been able to do a sweet spot in public policy, which is warmer houses, fewer greenhouse gas emissions, better local economy, more jobs, and dealing with an underemployed, helping an underemployed group get more engaged. So I want to talk a little bit now about the infrastructure for retrofitting in Canada, because there's lots more that we can do, and that's really the focus of our paper, is a new kind of mechanism for helping scale up retrofits. But right now, in Canada, we have provincial grants and initiatives, so you're all probably maybe familiar with Live Smart BC. Here in British Columbia, you get various grants for retrofits that you might do. And they've done something recently called on-bill financing, which I'll talk about a little bit later here in BC. So that program is supported by the federal government because the federal government has an eco energy program, which is really a standardized way of going into doing energy audits in houses. So that's really good infrastructure to have across the country, because there are lots of consistency. It's clearly going to be part of the program. You have the audit, and then you do the upgrades, and then you check to see how that went according to the audit. It's a way of keeping control and making sure that what you wanted to do happened. Now the trouble with the eco energy grants is that right now they're due to expire at the end of March 2012 here. And you might recall from some of your discussions around political forces in the country that those grants were actually added back in thanks to Jeff Layton's energetic pushing during the campaign, and they were added kind of reluctantly back in because the Harper government wanted to maintain a little bit more vote in that area. There's certainly no guarantee that it's going to be continuing past the end of March. We haven't heard anything yet that would indicate that it would. Hopefully they'll be keeping the infrastructure in place. And finally, I was talking about this point earlier. This is the standards and the energy auditors. That's the part that we hope will stay in place, even if the grants don't, because that's very important infrastructure for the provincial programs that are going on. But there's a question here. So, if it makes so much sense for a homeowner to do the retrofits, why aren't many more people doing it? What could the barriers be? Well, one of them is the amount of grant funding available. So I don't know if you know this story about Live Smart BC, but they put the grant up, and so many people signed up for it that they had to pause it for a while before they renewed it. So there's some limits to the grant funding. It's not available for everybody who wants to do it. This is a big one. It's hard to find $7,000 or $10,000 sometimes to be able to pay out to do the retrofits. And sometimes you think if you're only owning your home for 3 or 4 years, you might decide that it's not really worth the effort. And then finally, that financing, if you have to go out and buy it, make arrangements for it, can be expensive. So, what the core of the paper here is something I want to talk around some of those barriers. It's a new idea. And the new idea is about municipal leadership. So we've talked about federal government and provincial government. So what are the avenues here for municipalities to take the lead? And we were fortunate enough to hear a story from the mayor of this little town, Babylon, New York. And this was at a Green Jobs conference, and they had a really interesting story to tell for Babylon, New York. And you could tell it was his kind of project, and he brought it along. They established something called Long Island Green Homes. And the basic idea was that Babylon would lend money to homeowners for retrofits. The homeowners would save over $1,000 a year, and they would use those savings to pay back the loan on their services bill. So it would be tied up, and it would be tied up. So the town lends the money, people get the fix done, and they pay back on their property tax bills. The average payback is almost 9 years there. And I said that already. How's it work? Another part that was really important about this was that they based the repayment on projected savings. So they adjusted the payments so that the homeowner would never be paying more than they would have been paying for their energy. And anyway, and they tried to make the payments so that people would be paying a little bit less, so that it seemed like a financial advantage to do the work. Very safe for Babylon because it's coming through on their services bill, and they have the property really to hold on to. So it's a very kind of safe for the town financially. Then they were very creative in the way that they needed to find the loan money. Oh, and also they charged an administration fee of 3%. If you're running something, you have to recover the cost, so that was very smart of them to do. Um, and the energy auditor is licensed by the town. They have control over that. Here in Canada, we have an advantage because we have the eco-energy infrastructure. There, they had to do their own. So essentially applies as an energy audit, approved when the savings are equal to or greater than the current energy bill. Payments are added to the municipal services bill. And this is what's happened. Since 2008, they've done 638 retrofits for a population of over 200,000. Huge number. And I didn't listen to it. And that's a huge outcome. It's really worked very, very well. And they had to have a person of vision who was the mayor. They had to have some creativity. They had a fund that they need to hold to cap the ash from their waste facility. And so they were able to make a case that CO2 was really a solid waste, and therefore they could use some funds from that fund in order to lend out to homeowners. So they got a $2 million revolving loan fund from their creativity. So Babylon is the story that everybody talks about because it's so great. But there are other cities in the States as well who are doing that same kind of mechanism called PACE funding, who are, able to lend out money and get the retrofits happening and get it paid back on property tax and utility bills. We don't have that yet in Canada, although we have 1 or 2 starts. And it could work in Canada. There's basically 2 ways to do it. Something boring called local improvement charges, or else something called on-bill financing through utilities. And we think this is worth some work, because imagine how you could scale up action if you could free municipalities to take leadership on this file. So the local improvement charges, that's what happens. That's if you get a sidewalk in front of your house, a local improvement charge applies. So you're charged on your tax bill for your portion of the sidewalk improvement. That's basically a local improvement charge. The challenge in Canada is to widen that definition so that retrofits could also be included in it. But it would work much like Babylon. So the municipalities would provide no-cost funds for the upfront costs. The owners would repay over time as a special assessment on their property taxes. The assessment would be attached to the property rather than the owner. So if it were sold up in between, then it would just transfer over, and the new owner would pay the 3 or 4 years that might be remaining and reap all the benefits if they stay longer. Secured with a lien, so that means that the city is the first person paid, so to make sure that they get their money back for their loan. And the really key thing about this is that it doesn't affect the property tax of non-participants. So this isn't going to hit any other taxpayers in the pocket, and they often are a little bit sensitive about that. So that's one model, local improvement charges. And the other model is called on-bill utility financing. And that actually is now set up to be done in British Columbia. The province has done on-bill financing legislation. And that would allow the utilities to lend money to homeowners to do the retrofits and to pay back on their bills. It's just getting started. There are a couple of pilot communities who are starting to work on it. And in fact, the province is going to be doing an RFP in the next few months asking for input about the regulations. So they've got the legislation, and now they want the regulations, which is how they'll actually implement it. So it's a good thing to keep on in mind, because it's got potential for us to be really a public policy tool. So, what do Canadian municipalities need to move forward? Well, the regulatory changes I was talking about. So it's slightly different in each province. But essentially, in each province, the province needs to say, okay, municipalities, we think this is a good idea. And yes, I will expand that definition of local improvement charges so that you can go ahead and do this initiative. There are some hesitations. People are worried that municipalities might take on too much debt, or they're worried that there might be some default. But mostly I think it's about change. I think it's mostly about this being a new idea and hard to move forward. Explicit approval, we just talked about it for a minute. All right, but before we move any further, I just want to show you a bar graph of how this might work. So here's how much you might spend on your per year on your heating, $2,800. So let's say you enter the program and immediately you're only paying just over $2,000 for your energy, and you're saving this amount, and that's going down to pay the debt, to pay the loan down, to even save $10 a month. And then after it's all paid off, after your 7 or 10 years, then you're still only paying $2,000 and you're saving $771 for the rest of the time. So it's a pretty attractive sell, actually. All right. So in BC, like every other province, it needs clarity from the province to use this mechanism for improvements. Dawson Creek was working very diligently trying to get this happen for a while, and it fell apart. Vancouver's got an interesting pilot, which is very similar, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. But in addition, there need to be some legislative amendments. So one is to allow municipalities to record the money that they've borrowed to allow for full cost recovery projects separate from the debt. So if it can be recorded separately, which is quite possible Ontario does, then it means that the municipality's credit rating isn't impacted. So that's one of the arguments that they've been using to stop it. And the other one is to allow the retrofits to stay attached to the property and not the owner, because then it becomes treated like any other local improvement and doesn't become part of the owner's personal debt. So Vancouver launched the first pilot project in Canada in the spring. It was launched in May 2011, and they have a goal to retrofit 500 homes. They had to do something a little bit creative about the funding. So they had to sort of basically put up some collateral just in case somebody defaulted on the loans, and because it's a pilot and it's a new thing. And Van Cities put some money in, and then a private donor put some money in, and this is the loan cost that people are going to be able to pay on. It's self-financing, so all the costs of administering it are included in the recovery. And we've talked about where the funding is coming from. And it's going to be recoverable. There's going to be a quarterly charge on the sent from the city to the homeowner. The city will then send it on to the Van City. They are actually doing some lobbying to try and get that changed. If they can get the definition changed and attached to the property owner, then they don't have to do so many steps behind it, and there probably doesn't have to be the backing, financial backing from the municipality. Halifax is also doing something similar, and Halifax wants to do a similar kind of mechanism to install solar. And they did get some changes to their charter from their provincial government that will allow them to lend money to retrofit and to pull it back on the tax bill. It hasn't started yet. They're just issued an RFP. They're hoping to get going in a few months' time. So Vancouver is a beacon of light. Halifax is a beacon of light. A couple of other smaller communities in British Columbia, and we're hopeful that this will be something that will spread across the country. Just to, again, a few details about Halifax. They're looking at 500 to 700 homeowners. They will create 200 jobs, 3 million energy savings. It costs less than the annual energy savings. The payback is expected in 5 to 10 years. Ottawa is also exploring how to use this model. They haven't got it going yet because they do need to get some permission to move things forward. So I do have a summary sheet here for you. And the summary is that municipalities are well positioned. They could quickly take action to this mechanism, scale up climate action quickly, stimulate the local economy, grow jobs, help residents pay less, live more comfortably, drop greenhouse gas emissions, and finally address federal and provincial gaps in retrofit programs and emission targets goals. And the good thing about all of that is they could do that with no new taxes. So, a proven model, we just need a few little changes in regulations to be able to impact the change. We need these people who are doing the pilots to go forward and show Canadian communities that it can be done. And we need senior levels of government that will support the initiative. I would say that we need senior levels of government to do way more on supporting action on climate change in general. But this is a really good place to start. Okay, so does anybody have